should have like a double in every country, right, for ourselves. So there's been minor changes to the program of this, the remaining of the spring semester. We mainly added classes because we realized that we have mistakenly not scheduled all of the bagel on Sundays. On some Sundays in March, we just, I don't know how it happened actually, it doesn't matter. So this is you all got emails, but this is also the upgraded program, including the remaining dates for Rosh Esther, actually. Today we're going to finally reveal one of the meanings of Rosh Hashanah. When I called Rosh Hashanah, I had no idea why. But as it comes along, we keep making up meanings, and one of them is going to be explained today, possibly. So don't forget to take those if you want to know your schedule, if you didn't get the email, or if you're old-fashioned. And we're still collecting donations before Passover for our Holocaust survivor kits, which you can donate to via this link. And we have not reached our goal of $1,000 yet, so I guess when I said micro donations, people are like, we mean really, he means micro donations. So I mean micro donations, but not that micro. Okay, so hopefully we'll at least cover the cost of the
And on March 30th,
Mhm.
we are going to be, actually what we're going to be doing with that money is that we're going to be writing cards of greetings of hello and happy Passover for those baskets. So it's going to be after this class. So we hope you'll join us to do that.
Yeah, they will. We were told that they will appreciate a personal note, and our 20s and 30s group will be actually physically packing the basket. So it's like a whole project. So if you so want, maybe it'll be nice by March 30th to reach our goal of $1,000. All right. So this is one of my favorite talks to give about Purim, and because Purim is really an amazing holiday. It's got so deep and multi-layered and got so much to talk about. And usually, often we celebrate Purim. We read the Megillah. I even heard that there's going to be a Purim spiel here. And yeah, I know it's Herb's like surprised. Purim spiel? What? And but we don't always spend the time to kind of go into the depth of the story, which is one of the most amazing ones in the Bible or at all. So hopefully we'll get to do that a little bit today. Um, and maybe I'll start with a song. Okay, so there's a Hasidic song about Purim. It goes like this. It's like your Hebrew quiz of the week. See what you can make of it. There's not a lot of words in it. And you can see like in some places you'd see like 1,000 Hasidic people standing in a circle in a huge hall, and they're all and then they start real slow and they go like this. Purim, Purim, Purim lanu, Baruch Asher bachar banu, she'ihiyanu v'kiyemanu la'azman hazeh, she'ihiyanu v'kiyemanu la'azman hazeh. Purim, Purim, Purim lanu, Baruch Asher bachar banu, she'ihiyanu v'kiyemanu la'azman hazeh, she'ihiyanu v'kiyemanu la'azman hazeh. כמה זמן אל נאמן, כמה זמן אב הרחמן, כמה זמן אל נאמן, כמה זמן אב הרחמן. And imagine 1,000 people singing it, starting real slow, and slowly starts to intensify. Purim, Purim, Purim לנו באו, שבחר בנו, שהחיינו וקיימנו לזמן הזה, שהחיינו וקיימנו לזמן הזה. כמה זמן אל נאמן, כמה זמן עבר, etc., כמה זמן אל נאמן. And they go on and on for like an hour, and it gets ecstatic, really. It's a very serious thing. It's like serious and funny at the same time, but very serious. Now, who got the words? This is your Hebrew quiz. So, Esther, real? Right.
How much time? How much money?
Yes, El Ne'eman. All right. Yeah. So they sing Purim, Purim, Purim. You know that word? Purim, Purim, Purim. Lanu, to us. Right. We have Purim. Baruch Asher Bachar Banu. What is that? Baruch. Blessed be the one Asher Bachar Banu, who chosen us. Yay. Right? It's like, oh, right? So it's like up, yay, we're right? We were chosen. Purim, Purim, Purim lanu, Baruch Asher Bachar banu, she'echiyanu v'yemanu lahazman hazeh. So it means Purim, Purim, Purim to us. Blessed be the one who chose us. She'echiyanu. But then listen, but the next part makes it a little more interesting, right? Hamazman. How long, God? El Ne'eman. How long? Hamazman Av HaRachaman, merciful Father. All right, so it's like we're the chosen people. Yay! Thank you. We're so happy. And then, oh my God, how long do we have to bear this? You see, and they. So this is a very. It's a ecstatic song, and they all get into ecstasy, and they ask this question. On the one hand, they're proud of being the chosen people, the Jews, the Hasidic Jews. On the other hand, they ask God, oh my God, God, how long can we be the chosen ones? Huh. Right? It's a very hard cross to bear, so to speak, right? So yes, it is. It is. And the one who bore the cross was also Jewish, but that's the whole other lecture, right? All right. So what is that? How do you take this? Why? What do you make of this? And why before Purim? What's up?
It's a real banger.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a catchy tune for sure, right? But what may be the deeper meaning? Why would they be doing that? And what's their relation to Purim?
Chosen for what?
Chosen for what, right? Chosen for what? For what? To be special, to suffer, to be in the diaspora, yeah? What else? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How long to be persecuted?
That we're persecuted, right? We were so chosen, yet look at our, like fate from Purim time to today, right? So really, like, when did we ever sign this contract, right? It's kind of like we didn't look at the dotted line, right? You'll be the chosen ones, but to do what exactly? To be what? Yeah.
In Purim, God is hidden or not present.
Right.
So like, where the hell are you? When are you coming back?
Exactly. So this brings us to another point. It's a segue. Thank you, Ron. So, I don't know. And again, I'm talking about Purim, and it's actually I don't know how much the people in the room actually know the story of the Book of Esther, and I don't know how much you've studied about Purim in the past. So I will apologize, right? I'm kind of like we'll build it step by step, and then we'll have a discussion. So a lot of the knowledge is in the room, right? So Iran, you were making this very good point. Speaking of Rosh Esther, which also is Hester, to hidden. Some of you might know that the book of Esther, I think, is the only book in the Bible. Maybe there's another one where the name of God actually is not mentioned. So not even the God isn't even spoken about. There's no reference to God, so much so, and so much so that people have asked, why is the book of Esther even in the Bible? Because roughly speaking, the Bible is God's book. It's a book about God and God's relationship with the people, with the world, with history, with nature, with, I don't know, different things, right? With the sacrifices that God loves to get, and the barbecue smell, all those things that God loves, but why, if it's a secular book, right? If it's a secular book, then why is it even in the Bible, right? So yeah.
Mordecai tears his clothes and it goes in sackcloth, basically, and you indicate that he is praying.
Well, that's a nice way to put it. I mean, look, yes, so maybe, right? And however, atheists could do that too, like when they're sad. So the question is, of course, a rhetorical one. And when you read the book of Esther, you realize that in the episode that you mentioned, but in fact, throughout the entire book, right, God or providence is very, very present. Everything there is, the name of the holiday, Purim, is actually a lottery, right? Everything there seems random. Everything there is a coincidence. Everything that happens, all the incidents seem to be by chance, right? And so the presence of God is actually there all the time, only that you need your eyes to see it. Does that ring a bell? What does that ring a bell to? God's presence is actually running the show, but it's not like we see God and angels present. Have you ever seen this thing happen anywhere outside of the book of Esther? The Wizard of Oz. Where else? Where else? What's that?
God was here.
In the Jacob ladder dream, and where else have you ever experienced, not just in books, that there's kind of providence, but it seems like there isn't, that everything seems like it's a coincidence, that everything is run by chance, but you need the eyes to see God's providence. Anyone ever experienced such a phenomenon? I mean, I'm a holy rabbi, so in my life, when I wake up in the morning, I see 3 angels in the sky, and God appears in a chariot and talks to me all the time. But I've been told that the regular people, like the likes of you, right? Yes, Mr. Faber?
This is a standard parenting trick.
Which is?
For your children, that things just magically happen for you.
Right, and here's the tooth fairy again, right? And so in other words, that would make the book of Esther, of course, a metaphor for our own reality, which could explain why those Hasidic Jews, they're singing, because they're looking at the world and they're seeing, this. We live in the kingdom of Achashverosh, so it seems, not just. Don't get it in the narrow sense of, oh, no, this election happened or that election happened. I'm talking about very broad, historic kind of concept, right? Because what is the metaphor? Let's get into the metaphor. First of all, God is hidden. And in order to realize the providence of a higher power, or whatever it is you want to call that, right? You got to have the eyes to see it. Which is why, so one of the interpretations of the Esther is from Hester, from hidden. Right? It's also about Ishtar, she's a goddess, it's a Persian name, a lot of things, but so when I called Rosh Esther, I was thinking about that, about the hidden, right? All right, so let's go deeper into the metaphor. And if you don't know the story very well, that's okay, because you get a brush-up course. Who's running the show in the Empire of Persia, according to the story? Achashverosh. What kind of a monarch is Achashverosh? He's a party animal, and he's basically drunk all the time, right? And he makes a party that goes for like how many days? Who remembers? What's that? 180 days. Like, I want to go there, right? So some hungover, right? At the 181st day, right? So basically the forces of drunkenness and chaos and stupidity and kind of like, right, are running the show, right? So that's kind of like I don't know if you've ever like felt that, right? That like, well, who's, and like when you're a kid, you think that there's like grown-ups who are responsible and, oh, they know what they're doing, right? Somebody up there must know what they're doing. Like, I don't know, the FBI, I don't know, like, I don't know who, right? But then as you mature, you realize that the forces of chaos often rule the world, right? So yeah. Oh, there's to admit someone, admit them into our madhouse. Anyway, so right, so there's quite a deep metaphor for reality. So those Hasidic Jews are acknowledging that when they're singing the song, right? And then what happens when the forces of chaos, are led to rule? What happens? Who emerges? Haman.
Ooh.
Right. So that's kind of like an expansion of the metaphor. Evil comes from neglect. Right. Evil comes when where you let the world be run by basically not run. Right? When you let the world or your reality be run by drunkenness and carelessness, oh, let's just party, whatever, like who cares, right? Then, into this vacuum, that's when the Hamans of the world will rise. right? So that's kind of like, but let's go deeper into the metaphor. It gets much more complicated, much more complicated. Purim is really through the looking glass, right? Because then let's talk about Mordechai and Esther for so what makes them special from all the other people in Persia? They're Jews. But what kind of Jews are they? In other words, when what's her real name? What's her Hebrew name?
Hadassah.
Hadassah. When she goes into the palace, she's using her Hebrew name? No, she's using her Persian name, which is Esther. Comes from Ishtar, from the goddess Ishtar. And do we know? Does the king know that she's Jewish?
No.
Right. So it's kind of like forgotten or hidden or concealed that her true identity. Now it's a little bit like, I think that when we read the story, we realize that the Jewish existence in that empire kind of resembles Jewish life in the United States, where the Jews are very integrated, right? Mordechai and Haman are like, they're opposites, but they're also kind of similar. How are they similar? They're both kind of competing on who's going to be the royal vizier, who's going to be Jafar, right? It's like, and they're very integrated in the kingdom, so much so that when all these things happen, Esther just comes in. Nobody knows that she speaks the language, and it's kind of like, and any of you have like a Hebrew name and an American name, right? I don't. Whenever I go and I order a drink, they're like, my name is Or. They're like, huh? But then I have to tell them one of the jokes, like my brother's name is Either, and I was called Or, or like that, and then it's like, what? What was this guy with it? What is he saying? And then I get my coffee like 5 hours later with the wrong order in it because I confused them, right? So the wrong kind of milk or something like that. So right. So, but most of you, I think, have actually, or many of you have if I don't know about all of you, but not all of you have a Hebrew name necessarily, but a lot of us here have this double kind of like identity, right? With the two names. So Esther is that, right? So the Jews in Persia are very much immersed, integrated in the culture, right? And then there's going to have to be a process of remembering what the true identity is. Did you want to say? Did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, I don't remember in the story her deliberately concealing that she was a Jew. It just never came up.
Well, no, Mordechai told her.
Oh,
Mordechai tells her, do not tell that you are not, that you're just what don't, right? So it's kind of like, and that kind of brings us to, so if Haman is that, and okay, so and soon we're going to get to where it gets very, very complicated, but even if we're on that level, so there is a moment, the most dramatic moment in the story is when Esther is made to choose. And she actually had a choice. Because when it came time, the time came to go and confront the king and try to shuffle things up, to resist, right? Mordechai is giving her like that kind of a Polish mother speech, even though he's her uncle, right? You don't have to do this. It's okay. If you don't do it, maybe somebody else will save the Jews. But maybe we'll all die. Never mind. It's like, but then he tells her. He tells her, but who knows? Maybe this is why you have become the queen. It could be that this is your existential moment to make a choice. And then she kind of thinks about it, and she's like, she tells her to fast, and then she goes and she kind of plots this whole manipulative plot how to get Haman, and she does successfully. And some interpretations suggest that in this kind of like metaphor for our world, this transformation that Queen Esther Hadassah undergoes through is actually that each and every one of us in our life, at least once, have this moment, maybe we have many more of those, just not just one, where we have to make a deep existential choice. Do we just go with the flow, right? Persia, parties, right? Or do we kind of like take a step an existential choice that could even cost us our life. She was scared for her life to confront the king, right? And make a difference, right? And that can kind of like if you think about Jewish identity in that sense. So maybe an interpretation of what does it mean to be a Jew is the willingness to do that, right? The willingness, because you see, she would have been safe. She wouldn't have been killed. She was the queen. Nobody knows she's Jewish. If Haman goes and kills the Jews and she doesn't reveal her true identity, right? She would remain the queen in the palace. No harm for her, right? Yet she decided to step up and save her people. And then the question is, when you realize that you live in a world that is led by chaos and drunken kings and queens and whatever, and then you see that Haman rises and evil prevails, right? And then what is that moment when you will say, what, but I can be saved, but hey, there's people, my people need help, or the people need help, right? And I'm going to say, I remember that I'm Hadassah, and that there's actually good and bad in the world, and so that's kind of like the existential metaphor of Purim. So it's actually a very serious story, and the plot thickens. There's more to say about that. Before I continue, though, with some more levels of that complexity, any thoughts or comments so far? Yeah, go ahead. Oh my God. The hero of the story, yeah.
I just want to point out that there's an opinion that Esther didn't save the Jews, that Esther simply pointed out to the king, okay, that the Jews have a right to defend themselves. Because he didn't say, stop. He said, I'm going to give the Jews the right to defend themselves. And the Jews are allowed to arm themselves and then slay 30,000, whatever it is,
Yeah.
of those who came. So it basically ends as a story where we rise and fight back.
Right. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that because that ending of the book is very, very interesting, and some would say problematic, or actually not problematic. It's a very interesting twist of events towards the end. Well, but for sure she had a role in it. In other words, if she hadn't done it, how would it have happened? So she rose to that challenge. And how it played out in the end, we can read in the book. Yeah.
So, two questions. One, my experience with the story is listening to it. So is what is read often in the synagogue the entire story that you're relating?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Parts I don't remember.
Right. So not everybody knows all the parts of the story, and maybe so I kind of assume. So as I talk, I kind of assume that people know the story. But as it is, if you don't, you'll fill in the gaps, and you can always take the book and read it. In the end, it's got 10 chapters, and it's not that long. It's got weird names in Persian, but don't let that disturb you.
And then the second question is, do you know when and where it was written?
Well, it's a good question because it's clearly was written in a later time, and was not written as like the alleged period. So I'm not sure exactly when it was written. We know that it's a relatively later book in the Bible. I'm assuming that it's like from the last centuries, before the Common Era, but I'm not sure.
And in Israel?
We don't know. Well, it probably. We don't. So to that matter, we don't know that the story ever happened. It may have, but like most of the Bible, by the way, not all of it. Some of the Bible, we have some archaeological evidence to support that there was a King Hezekiah in Jerusalem, right? But like, did the Exodus story ever happen? Did Purim ever happen? It may have, or it may have happened a little differently, right? But it's a fairy tale told, and it's very, very. It's written like a fairy tale. And we're going to get it. It's the literary deepness of it. We're gonna get to it. I think I want to take it one step further. So one thing that is interesting about Purim is that there is a midrash that connects Purim with Yom HaKippurim, with Yom Kippur. There is a midrash that says that when at the end of days, at the end of history, all the Jewish holidays are going to be canceled. So we're not going to have Passover, and we're not going to have Hanukkah. We're not going to have, Shavuot and Sukkot and even Rosh Hashanah is going to be canceled. All those holidays will be canceled because the Jewish holidays are basically our sanctuaries in time, right? They hold history, they tell a story. Once history ends and it's like, ta-da, the date of the Messiah or whatever it is, we're not going to need history anymore. We're not going to need the holidays. However, they say there's only 2 holidays that will never be canceled, even at the day to come, at the Olam Haba, the world to come. And those are Yom Kippur and Purim. These will be the only 2 holidays which will be celebrated even at the end of history. Why? Why? And why Purim? I mean, we could kind of figure out Yom Kippur, right? It's like our favorite holiday. It's the holiest of holies. It's when we are kind of like fasting and becoming like almost angelic, it's like we're almost leaving our physical body. We don't need food, right? None of you have ever thought about food in Yom Kippur, right? Because you're like ecstatic about the prayer, right? And the angelic voices of the choir of Temple Sinai, right? You're not thinking about food or drink or physical needs, of course, right? Or at least that's the point. And then through ecstatic prayer, it really does happen, right? That often you kind of say, oh, actually, I'm not that hungry. I'm in a different space, right? So Yom Kippur being our holies of holies, we can kind of see why they give it this status above all other holidays. But why Purim? Purim is like the opposite, right? It's you. What are the 4 commandments in Purim? In Hebrew, it's like the 4 M's: Megillah, Matanot, Le'evyonim, Mishteh, and something else that I have to remember in a second. So I went to sleep late last night. But one of them is Mishteh, which is drinking. We are commanded to drink. You read the Megillah, Mishloach Manot. So the 4 are that we read the Megillah. You have to hear the Megillah, which we will with the aid of the Purim Spiel team, right? And then you have to give Mishloach Manot to your friends, like give treats to your friends, right? Matanot la'evyonim, which is you have to give charity to the poor, and you have to drink, to the point that you do not know the difference between damned Haman and blessed Mordechai. Really, you're supposed to really get very tipsy, all right? I don't know if you ever did that. I hope that you're all wholesome congregants, I know. But if ever like in your far away back, past in like when your college days or whatever, you abuse some substances, there's that point before you pass out, right? So I've been told by some other people that that you kind of like lose it, and maybe just before you lose, you have this moment of clarity, but then you wake up in the morning, I don't know where exactly. So basically Purim, that filthy holiday when we're like partying and costume, which is not a mitzvah, but and we kind of like very visceral, kind of like it's a carnival, right? What is now in all the cultures? There's also something to say about Purim that this season, right? So yesterday we saw a lot of people with shamrocks on their St. Patrick's Day is coming, and in many cultures, right? In this, like towards the end of winter, beginning of spring, you see there's because nature is about to, nature is awakening, right? So it's actually a carnival, right? Why will that not be? Why is that? Why is Purim put in the same holy category of Yom Kippur? That even at the end of days, it will not be forgotten. Yes.
I think it's like the arts and sciences. Like, if Yom Kippur is to remember, what's important in life, Purim is why we live. We talked last year about Ganabron talked about how the words are connected.
Yep.
Kippur and Purim.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot what that was, which
Yeah.
is why it's nice that we review things every year.
Mm-hmm.
But she spent a lot of time talking about that root of the words.
Yeah.
And how they're
So it's not as they sound the same. As far as I know, they don't exactly come from the same root because kapara means atonement, and Purim is like the lottery. But who knows? There's the Hebrew language is holy, so there's all these connections. But but yes, it's so the way that people have been explaining that midrash of making like a comparison and a juxtaposition between these two holidays is that it's kind of like the same. You want to say something, Jim?
Sure.
Yeah.
When you talked about like, okay, we should get drunk
Mm-hmm.
on Purim to such an extent that we don't discriminate between us and the other. That's what came up in my mind.
Mhm.
We transcend dualism.
Yes, yes. And that is why it's actually, you see, that's how it actually is connected to Yom Kippur.
Right.
Because in both of these holidays represent an extreme state of consciousness or an extreme realization of that transcends the regular dual nature of history, of us and them, of and then actually this game of opposites is very important in the book of Esther, and we're going to get to that in a moment, and not just about us and them. There's a few of those, and that is kind of why, all right? Because if Yom Kippur we transcend kind of ourselves, our regular state of being, our regular, understanding of history, or our regular, habits of eating and not eating or whatever, through holiness, through religious ecstasy, through being angelic, right? Being not non-dualistic in that sense. It's kind of like connecting with the divine, with God, whatever. Purim is kind of like the same, but it's like redemption through the gutters. You get so low that you can only rise from there. It's kind of like non-dualistic, right? From getting drunk, but isn't the metaphor of the whole book that we are all drunk by reality, right? We are, if you think about it in the deep sense, we are living in King Ahasuerus's, mega party all the time, and religion, spirituality is supposed to something like, wake up, this is not reality. Right? Stop watching TV like that all the time, right? But TV is reality. You see what I mean? There's a truer nature, there's a deeper truth. There's something that you see, and Yom Kippur kind of like it's the same thing, but from the other side. You can either transcend from here, or you can descend in order to transcend. So that's why these two holidays are deeply connected, but that also explains the kind of like the deep spirituality of Purim. That it's not just a carnival. Well, all carnivals are actually very deep and spiritual, in all cultures. But it's a deities are celebrated, and it's all like, right. But so it's yes, we party, yes, we drink, yes, we wear costumes, yes, we laugh, yes, we sing. But it's part of a very deep kind of a spiritual practice of seeing beyond the facade of reality, right? It's like remembering to forget, forgetting to remember. It's like this kind of like, right? So. Mm-hmm.
Just one more thing. I just realized that in Hinduism, this is the time of Holi, H-O-L-I, where it sort of transcends the caste system and class, and you throw color, you throw paint at everybody, including the owning class.
It's interesting because the in the story, India is mentioned because it begins, that it said that King Ahasuerus was a ruler of 127 countries from Hodu Vat Kush, from India to Africa, right? So who knows? Maybe it's quite possible actually that, right? So this is where you see. So then and then to kind of take this even a step further, the book of Esther is really an artwork of opposites that are juxtaposed. It's really through the looking glass. It's a hole of mirrors. Have you ever been to to one when you're a kid, or maybe you went with your children or grandchildren? Actually, these places where they have these mirrors where you see yourself and you don't even know where's the right and left. Right? It's really the book is set like this, and let's just notice a few of them. It juxtaposes the genders, male and female. It juxtaposes, Haman and Mordecai, us and them, good and evil. So even let's start with a gender thing. So who's the first queen in the book? Vashti, right? And she's like one of the world's first feminists, right? Because what did King Ahasuerus want her to do? Dance in what attire? Kind of naked, like only with a crown to her head, right? The crown with what, right? So basically, and like to show her beauty, blah blah blah, right? And she refused, right? And it's basically that feminine refusal to patriarchy, right? That kind of started the whole. Without Vashti, nothing could. He had to divorce Vashti in order to get Esther, right? So it's a very strong. So you have an empire, Persia, right? Which with those 127 lands, right, from India to Asia to Africa, where it's very clear that the rulers are men, and they're very well. With Hashvarosh, his archetype is like a drunk and dumb, but yet he's still the king, right? And in both Vashti and Esther, they're not equal to him, right? Esther, he says she's his wife, but she has to be very worried, right? That so it's a very patriarchal society. The way that they get all the virgins and they dip them for half a year in this sauce and then in this sauce. So then when they get to him, they're very soft and crunchy, whatever. It's a very patriarchal story. It's seemingly so, right? Where the men have all the power and the women have no power. Yet it's feminine resistance, right? It's Vashti. She's like the first heroine there by resisting to the king. That's how the plot kind of even starts to evolve, right? So from the very beginning, even before Queen Esther comes in, we see that the story is a lot about what looks like a world ruled by men, but actually the feminine, even in that world, they have something to do, right? They have something to do, and that changes everything. You're right here. I noticed in most of the committees in Temple Sinai, you were the majority, by the way. Right. So that is something. And then Queen Esther herself, right? She uses whatever is in the power that she has. She uses her sexuality. She uses her wits. She uses her conspiracy conniving abilities. She uses her political abilities. She uses everything that she can, and she kind of manages to turn Haman against himself, basically. Right, and kind of uses kind of almost his methods of conniving and conspiracy, and a lot of our understanding of how ego works in the world, right, to overcome him. So we see, there's a very strong element of like masculine, feminine energies and how they work in the world, right, or at least in more traditional societies. However, it almost looks like, okay, so the whole thing is that the men are oppressors and the women are oppressed, right? But in the end, who prevails? Esther. And is she like from Peace Now? Is she like a pacifist? No, she's not. And is she vicious just like those men? She is. And is she vengeful? She is. And is she outsmarts them? She does, right? So who's better? Right? It's like you remain with that question, kind of like it's like. Right, the struggle of the gender or the battle of the genders, but it kind of leaves you with an open-ended question. And similarly, and I think this is what you were, Jim, what you were referring to, and this thing, and you were talking about it too, or about what happened in the end, because, and this is maybe a very important and poignant kind of point to our days and to our Jewish identity and to many conversations about anti-Semitism and Israel and blah, 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 and all those things that people are even afraid to talk about, is that what happens in the story? Because if you read the story simply, the Jews are what? What are they? They're in traditional role of being what? Victims. We are the victims. Haman is bad. We're in the diaspora. Some evil person comes, persecutor, and they want to kill us. And then they try to kill us. We won. Let's eat. Right? This kind of very simple kind of way to. It's actually not true, right? Because they didn't all always try to kill us, right? Most of the time, maybe they didn't. Or sometimes they did, but not always. We won. We didn't always win. Let's eat. Well, we have Yom Kippur, right? So it's almost true, that this sentence summarizes Jewish history, but not exactly. And here in this story, as Herb was saying, so once Esther got her way, the Jews go and slaughter, right, all those who wanted to kill them. And then when the king asked, what else do you want? They said, we want permission to slaughter even more of our enemies in Shushan the following day. Which is why, by the way, that's why you celebrate Purim, like there's 2 days to celebrate Purim. If you're in Jerusalem, if you're in a city that has been surrounded by a wall by the time of the first temple, which is like Jerusalem, you would celebrate Purim the following day. It's called Shushan Purim. So Purim is actually the only holiday in the world, in the Jewish world that I know, that you can kind of like either celebrate one day, because let's say, you're in Tel Aviv, you will celebrate it on Tuesday, and then people in Jerusalem will celebrate it on Wednesday. But if you really like love Purim, you can like go to Tel Aviv on Tuesday, and then once it's over, you like drive to Jerusalem, and here you are, you celebrated it twice. Or if you really don't connect with Purim and you don't like to celebrate it at all, you just find yourself in Jerusalem the first day, and you go to Tel Aviv the next, right? It's kind of like but then that custom to celebrate Purim the next day in Jerusalem is in memory of the fact that the Jews slaughtered their enemies for an additional day. So the whole last part of the Megillah is very violent, but the violent ones are who? The Jews, right? Yeah.
Maybe that gets back to your original point about God not being seen, because in Exodus, God is not happy about having to slaughter all the Egyptians, right? In the crossing, right? There's a passage.
Well, it's not in the Bible; it's in the Midrash. In the Torah, God has no problem slaughtering and everybody's dancing. In the Midrash, they say that when Miriam and all those Jews and they were dancing with their cymbals and their drums and right, and then the angels in the heavens were also, oh look, let's make a party in the heavens too. And then God said, why are you celebrating the Egyptians are also my creation. They're drowning in the sea, and are you singing?
That doesn't happen.
Well, we make a big celebration.
No. Yeah.
Right. So the issue.
God's reaction is not.
Well, it does not appear because God does not appear. Right. We're just left with. It's as if it's a secular political drama. Like God is not. Again, you have the eyes and the heart to understand that all those coincidences, and the book is full of coincidences. If you haven't read it, Mordechai happens to see some two guards at the palace, and then he tells the king, and it's written in the book, and it's forgotten. And the night that Haman, is plotting to kill, Mordechai the next day, hang him. Hashverosh can't sleep. He has insomnia. He opens the book. The book opens miraculously. The book of the royal memoirs, right? And in the page where it says that Mordechai saved his life, a few months back, he's like, did we ever reward that guy? And then, in other words, there's many coincidences that lead to the victory that aren't coincidences, but you don't know it, right? So that's about that. But I want to go back to the point of that thing where when I was a reform rabbi in Tivon in Israel, their custom was the whole congregation, they do read the whole Megillah, the ganze Megillah, as they say in Yiddish, the whole Megillah, because it's very long when you're a kid, it's always very boring. So the ganze Megillah also is something very long that you read through. But they would skip the last 2 chapters. They would omit it because they said, we don't want to read the part where the Jews get violent. And when I came there to be their rabbi, I served there for 5 years. And I said, no, we are going to read this because this is what makes the story so, actually, the literature is much richer. When you get to the point where are we really better than our enemies? Are we really better than them? Are we just the victims? Right? And always we are the ones who are the good ones, and Or does this story actually, just like it leaves us with the question of the masculine and the feminine, it leaves us with this open-end question of, are the Jews really better than their foes? What makes Haman's, there's also possible answers to that question, but if you want to take that reading to its extreme, Haman and Mordecai are just two mirrors of one another. This guy's got an ego, this guy's got an ego. This one wants the job of Jafar, this one wants to be the job of Jafar. This one happens to be Jewish, this one happens to be Amalekite. They're both in the empire, right? They're like, trying to be like, I'm going to be Elon Musk. I'm going to be Elon Musk, the guy in the right? And it's like, so this guy wants to kill this one. And then in the end, we just kill, we just are the ones who happen to be victorious, right? So are we or aren't we actually better than our oppressors? So who's the oppressor? Who's the oppressed? Yeah. Laura.
I don't know if I see it as a better or worse question as much as an equity and access. Like those are separate.
Can you explain?
Before you get to who's better or who's not better. I'm just reminded of I took my nephew to see and his friends to see Black Panther when it came out, because I didn't want him to be the only kid who hadn't seen the movie. And my sister came along. She's not a big movie person. She's not a superhero person. She's not into any of that. And she came along and she complained that she thought it was going to be better than the other superhero movies because she thought that the whole thing about the Black history was that it was going to be like more enlightened and more knowing, and they weren't going to have the same violence and all of that in the story. She said it was just the same as all the other Marvel stories.
Yeah.
And I said, but that was the whole point, like that they didn't have an equal figure to the other figures. And before we can get to how to do it different, you need access to being on the same plane.
So it's like so you see those last violent chapters like affirmative action, kind of like,
well,
let them slaughter now so that they can.
No, but to push back on not giving Esther credit on International Women's Day weekend, I think first you need access to the power, and first you need access to having the same potential and the same, ability to, show your might, and then the question later becomes, what do you do with it? But first there's the question of the problem.
Well, that's a very powerful interpretation too, right? There's the beauty of these tales is that there's more than one way to read it. It's a very kind of powerful story, and you react to it, in different ways. And it really is a good question, right? Of like the us and them, or the oppressed or the oppressor, the justified and the unjustified, and what makes, and very, very relevant to our days, what makes an act of violence? Is it like, when is it self-defense? When is it actually kosher to retaliate from an ethical point of view? Right? We all know that our people are up to date, are dealing with this evil. What happens when you're faced with a very big evil, right? And then and especially if you're a peacenik, right? If you're like a zealot warrior, let's get them kind of person, then never mind, right? But if you're actually a person who, like we spoke about this yesterday on Saturday, right at this point, that if you're actually a person or for people that actually believes in peace and in ethics and morality and humanity, and that we're all created in God's image, right? When would it become legitimate to actually use force and defend yourself? Or in the story, the Jews weren't even killed; they actually weren't slaughtered. They were saved. Yet they wanted to make a point by showing, hey, we're strong, right? So was it justified? Was it unjustified? And if we think about, just a second, if we think about dilemmas that Jews were in the diaspora for 2,000 years, did not have sovereignty, right? And all of a sudden, oops, we have a country. It has a strong army, right? And then all of a sudden, when the power shifts and changes, right? And we're seem to be, in a place of power. How are our values being? So that is something that, for example, when I was a rabbi in Israel, I would use the story of Esther a lot not to necessarily say what I think, but these are very complex things, but to kind of like show that, the Jews can be the victims, but they can also be, the fierce ones. Yeah.
Almost sounds like a holy war at the end. God is on our side, so we can have retribution.
Yeah, like a jihad, like in a sense, right? And although I learned from one of my Sufi teachers that jihad is, even in Sufi Islam, jihad is always a holy spiritual war that you launch within. It's never about another person, right? Which by the way is also how Hasidic interpretation. I know that the folks on Saturday morning, I'm a little bit repeating myself because then how many things do I know about Purim, right? So, but it really is so that that Amalek, which Haman is the Amalek, also in Hasidic teachings, in mystical teachings, Jewish mystical teachings, it's always about the Amalek within, the evil within. And I think that any way we interpret the story politically, right, we can see that if we, it really is a book of mirrors where we're asked to look at ourselves and recognize that each and every one of us, just like we can be existential heroes like Esther, we have the potential to lead a life that is like, Achashverosh rules, our carelessness, our drunkenness, our chaotic self. Each and every one of us has a potential to be Haman also, right? I mean, we're not, all the figures in the story are us, on some deeper level of the conversation. Yeah. Mhm.
So my understanding of why the Jews went and did the slaughter was that when Haman convinced King Ahasuerus to put out an order to kill all the Jews, Ahasuerus could not withdraw that order because he was the king divinely appointed by his gods, and to have taken back the order would have been to say, I was wrong, and that's not good. So all he could do was to say, okay, the Jews can defend themselves and attack against that. So that was the position they were in, either sit and be slaughtered or defend yourselves.
Right. So, which is also something similar to what her was saying before. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The reason I brought that up is I was brought up in Brooklyn amongst the Satmar, which is Hasidic. Although I was outside of the community, Purim is the one day I was allowed literally to be treated equally in the community. We had a 2-day carnival where the children used nuts and we did everything. But at night, Bedford Avenue, which is 4 Carlin Square, in front of the Tzaddik house, thousands of Satmar Jews would come out. And Satmar Hasidim are the ones that you see in the book, The Chosen. They don't believe we should be back in Israel.
Yeah, they're anti-Zionist. Yeah.
Right, but the interesting thing about my childhood being brought up in Satmar is the fact that in this community were a large number of Holocaust survivors who would come over as a group, and I forget if it was Lithuania they came from, and the Satmar lived on Bedford Avenue. They built them a house, and the community was much smaller then because they were Holocaust survivors, basically. Now it's hundreds of thousands, but then it was 25 to 30,000. Purim was a day for them, especially at the end. And I went to a Hebrew school that had a Satmar rabbi. But Purim was a day of redemption for them because they had come from Europe, and many of them came from concentration camps, okay, where they didn't fight back. And they saw Purim as a victory for the Jewish people in fighting back. It was sort of their July 4th in that respect. And on Purim, thousands would be in the street, and there'd be men, and these are the men that have the fur hats and the long coats with their sons and daughters on their shoulders dancing. And it was the one day of the year that you did not have to be the Torah student. It was the one day of the year that you can get drunk and be somebody that you aren't the rest of the year. And it was a wonderful holiday.
Yeah.
And a wonderful celebration. And the fact that we had this victory, no one looked at it like we slew 30,000 of them. It's that we had a victory. And to these people, it was very important to be able to look back, especially where they came from in Europe and what they went through.
Yeah, and your point is very good because, by the way, one of the one of like when people are like sort of determined, it's really undetermined exactly when was this book written. One notice so that it may have, some opinions are that it was written at the time of the first diaspora, or of some kind of diaspora, because it's really not a story of the Jewish people in their land. In some ways, it makes it more relevant to us here when we live in the minority, in a larger society, right? It really is a story. There's no mention of the land of Israel at all there, right? Oh, there is one. When about they talk about the temple that was destroyed, but no, actually, no, it's not. There isn't. It's a midrash that when the king talks about some of the things that he had in his palace, it was things brought from the temple, but it wasn't. It's not in the book. I mean, it's just a story that. So there's no mention of the land of Israel at all in the book, and it's a very diaspora kind of reality. The Jews are not living in their land, which also makes it. If we're taking your interpretation, right? It's when you are a minority, when you are the victim, you kind of need a story that says, "Hey, I'm not completely powerless. I can retaliate. I'm not, when the government tells me some evil person in the government is persecuting me, I have agency. I have this power." It's really a story of a minority, not of a people who have sovereignty in their land and a very strong military to do that. Yes, David. And then Joyce after that.
Is there some significance to the fact that the book is literally physically separated from the rest of the Bible, often in its own scroll?
Yes. So well, it is and it isn't, because it is part of the Bible, right? If you take the Bible, but it's traditionally read from a scroll because, hey, that's how books work, right? So back in the day, there wasn't a Bible. There was like a big shelf where there were like, many scrolls. So the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, are like a big scroll, and the rest of the books would be in scrolls, right? And then just like you read from the Torah, and it's a mitzvah, right? You read from the scroll of Esther, which is written in a separate, and Megillah means scroll. That's Megillah means scroll, like Galila, right? So there is a significance to it. The mitzvah is to read from a scroll, and it's also written by a sofer stam with a feather, and the same idea like a Torah tradition. Yeah, Joyce.
Well, it seems that the interpretations over and over again are the only way to heal from victimhood and from the hurt is to make others victims. And that's sort of the cycle that we've seen in history. Because in between, there's nothing healing that happens. So the question is, how does one do something much deeper, spiritually, emotionally, that connects us and human saving to God, connects human, so that there is actual healing of all that pain, which does not actually get healed.
Yeah.
When we make others victims.
Right, and I think that this is exactly where the story is. Like the story, again, it's a godless story. It kind of shows you how reality is, basically shows you how ugly humans are, right? Human beings are terrible animals. They're terrible species, right? We hate, we kill, we're violent, we're conspiring, we even in our own families, right? We have these, the king, the queen, and then in our larger societies, and it's us and it's them, and if you think, and then the story kind of tells you, if you think you're better, you're not really that better, right? And that's why when I said Purim is like redemption through the gutters, right? We're writing, it's just like Yom Kippur. It wants us to be able to see past the dualism, right? The dualism of the world and the us and the them and the. And it's kind of when in Yom Kippur we succeed to transcend, right? The way that the Megillah is written kind of shows you that there's no way. It puts it in your face that there's no way out, and that you're just part of it, just like anybody else, and you're no better than it. Essentially, you're not better than anybody else, right? You can be the victim. You can be, and I agree with you that it kind of by not from a very poetic, very powerful and poetic way, it kind of puts it in your face And it shows you, look, these are the cycles. This is how the empire is run. This is how the world is run, right? And are we able, like Esther, to remember that there's another level, that we are called, that she's also Hadassah? And did she remember? Or did she remain Esther in the sense that, yes, she saved the Jews, but she did it in the way that it's done in the empire. In other words, has she transcended above the game? Purim is a game. Or did she just join the game and was really good at it? Right? And what is actually victory? And Joyce, I know you a little bit, and I know what you're very active in, right? You are the kind of person who's dedicated to trying to break through those cycles. But as you know, even though there are good people like you who are very active to try to break it, humankind doesn't break through. We keep falling back to the same vicious cycles of violence and retaliation and cross-generational trauma and history that is being, and that's kind of like the ugly beauty and the ugly beauty, the ugly beauty and the beautiful ugliness of the book of Esther. It shows you how messed up everything is, including the Jews. We're part of it, right? And it's like there's no escape. So how do we transcend? That's in another holiday. or you go to the pub and you have a beer, say l'chaim with everyone, and then you're all friends, right? You're like,
So that the recognition of this in
Mhm.
itself could be a healing piece.
Yeah.
It seems like that.
Yes. I agree with you. And by the way, the custom of what time? Oh yeah, we have a few more minutes to discuss. Right, we probably should end in like 5 minutes because maybe some people will go to social action committee. So, so speaking of, right? So yes, so just showing it to you, right? So one way to go about it would be to write a scroll, and in the end there's a transformation, a big change, like a little bit like the Exodus, right? The Exodus is a Jewish story where there's a paradigm shift in the story. They were slaves, and then we were slaves, and then we were liberated, and a new chapter in history begun, right? But also after that, did they really those liberated slaves, did they really transform and become the wonderful children of God that God wanted them to be? No, they messed up. Like a day later, they became like weird, like people in the desert, right? Messed up with also, right? So the book of Esther, is it a paradigm shift? Is it not? On some level, it is, because if you look at it through the level of we're always victims, and we have no agency, and we're powerless Jews, and now we have the power. Now we can defend ourselves. It is a paradigm shift, and actually, I'm not entirely against that. I'm not a pacifist, right? And as we've seen even in recent history, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Like there are times in history where you got to be able to. People say Israel needs to has the right to defend itself. I say it's not. Nobody has the right to defend. It's the ugly duty to defend yourself. Nobody enjoys it, right? For the most part, unless you're like, right? But there are those points in history, and that is a paradigm shift, right? But on another level, it's what Joyce was saying, right? It shows us that we're caught in cycles of endless violence, and then when you see it, you might start to think, how do I transcend above it? And that's why it's juxtaposed and compared with Yom Kippur, right? Because it's the hard work in the shadowlands of our own souls. Yeah.
So is there a parallel with Hanukkah, which also is a story of Jews using violence to overthrow?
Well, there's a parallel because most of the stories are actually Jews using violence. Like the Passover was also very violent in the end, mind you, right? In the end, the complete victory was when they drowned, right? It wasn't like now all the Israelites and the Egyptians are going to like have hummus together in baklava in the desert, right? It did not transcend, right? In order for us to be saved, they had to go down under, right? And you can compare it with a lot of holidays, but then what lectures will I give on Hanukkah and Passover? You got to give me some slack here. Yeah. Anyone else? Who are you?
I have a
I've
question.
never seen you before.
I would like to know why the story of Esther is a Roman Catholic thing also. I've had Catholic friends tell me, oh yeah, the story of.
Because it's part of the Bible. Very simple. They read the what they call the Old Testament, and we call it's called the Bible.
I would just say I happen to have a copy of the
Megillah.
Christian Bible, which includes both, right?
Yeah.
They call out Esther as a separate thing. They don't put it in the Old Testament. They certainly don't put it in the Christian scriptures. They call it apocrypha.
Yeah. So this is like a whole other lecture, and maybe there's the Jewish Old Testament and the Christian Old Testaments are not exactly the same. There were different understandings of which books are included and not, and it's not exactly the same for the Jews and the Christians. But we're not going to get into all that now. I think we should probably end it here. Have a very happy Purim and L'chaim. All right. All right.